The word sarcasm itself comes from a Greek word, sarkazane, and it literally means to tear flesh. Oh, I'm just kidding her. Wow, you're so sensitive. That nervous laugh becomes, well, we could call it consent by silence.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about dating, specifically dating after 40. Have you ever been, on a date or maybe just starting something new and felt like your boundaries were being tested, pushed a little?
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time.
Yeah, like maybe a comment that felt kind of like a jab, but then they immediately say, oh, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Right. Or the classic, you're so sensitive.
Exactly. Or maybe a physical thing that felt too fast and you start wondering, am I overreacting here? Was that okay?
It's that internal questioning, isn't it? And understanding these moments is, well, it's crucial.
Totally. So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, these sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle tests people might use.
And knowing what they are is the first step. Because whether it's date one or you're a few weeks in, these situations tell you a lot. Huge insights into compatibility, respect, really someone's basic character. Our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to break down maybe 3 common ways people test you. And importantly, give you some tools, some clear ways to respond.
Without feeling like you have to shrink back or second guess yourself all the time.
Precisely. Protect your peace. Define your standards right from the start.
Okay, let's get into it. We're going to zero in on 3 common tests.
Absolutely.
Especially relevant, I think, for navigating things after 40. And like you said, it's not just spotting them.
No.
It's knowing how to handle it confidently. So picture this maybe.
Yeah.
You're on a second date. It's going okay. Conversation's flowing. And then maybe their hand slides onto your leg. Bit too familiar too soon.
Yeah.
You instinctively kind of shift away, maybe pull back slightly, and they laugh it off.
Whoa, realize I'm just playing.
That
Just playing.
Right. And your mind starts racing. Was it just a clumsy move?
Yeah.
A joke? Or was that something else? A test?
That little alarm bell going off inside. That gut feeling. It was probably picking up on exactly that. A test.
Wow.
And what we want to unpack is why these aren't just like awkward little moments. They can be quite deliberate probes designed to see what you'll put up with.
Okay. So where do we start? What's the first one?
Let's call the first one the sexual test. This often pops up early.
Right.
And it's really about how fast someone tries to escalate things. Physically or, even just verbally.
Okay. Give me some examples. What does that look like?
Well, it could be pretty subtle. Like, maybe they just stand a little too close when you're talking, invading your personal space bubble.
Yeah, that slight lean in, that feels off.
Exactly. Or maybe they casually drop something about sleeping over on a first or second date way too soon.
Whoa, okay, yeah.
Or it could be more obvious, a hand maybe lingering on your lower back, or they lean in and whisper something kind of sexual that just feels totally out of step with where things are at.
Gotcha.
And this is really, really common for adults dating now, especially with dating apps in the mix.
I bet. Things move fast sometimes.
They can, and there's pressure. It's interesting. Match did their big Singles in America survey.
Oh, yeah?
And found over 60% of women said they felt pressure to escalate sexually before they felt ready.
60%? That's huge.
It is. And it's not just about the physical act itself. It's often a test. A test of your assertiveness, right? Are you going to prioritize their desire over your own comfort level?
It reveals a lack of respect right off the bat, doesn't it?
It really does. Respect for your pace, your autonomy. And here's the danger. If you feel uncomfortable, but you just kind of laugh it off, maybe out of politeness or just awkwardness.
Yeah, you don't want to make a scene.
Right. But you're inadvertently teaching them that pushing your boundaries, it's okay, it works. That nervous laugh becomes, well, we could call it consent by silence.
Wow. Consent by silence.
So,
That's powerful. Okay, what if someone genuinely doesn't realize they're being tested? Like, how do you tell a clumsy move from a deliberate test? Especially if you're maybe less experienced with this stuff.
that's a fair question.
And how do you handle it? Without making it super awkward or feeling vulnerable yourself.
Okay, so the response is key, and it needs to be clear. Doesn't have to be a big confrontation, though.
Right.
You just hold your line, calmly state your position, something like, hey, I move at my own pace. If we're not aligned on that, that's okay, but I'm not rushing anything.
Simple and direct.
Exactly. And then watch their reaction. That's the real tell.
Ah.
A high-quality person, someone who respects you, they'll hear that and they'll respect it. They won't shame you for having standards.
But if they push back?
If they push back, get defensive, try to make you feel weird or guilty about it, that's not just awkwardness anymore. That's a huge red flag. It tells you they care more about getting what they want than about your comfort.
Okay. That makes sense. So that's the sexual test. What comes next? Not all tests are physical, right?
Definitely not. Some are trickier because they hide in plain sight. They use humor as camouflage.
Ah, okay. Leading us to test number 2,
Yeah.
the sarcasm test.
Exactly. This is when someone says something that's actually kind of mean or critical, but they immediately try to wave it away with, oh, I'm just kidding, or wow, you're so sensitive.
Ugh, yeah. That one's tough because it puts you on the defensive.
It does. And it's interesting, the word sarcasm itself, its roots are pretty telling.
Oh.
It comes from a Greek word, sarkazane, and it literally means to tear flesh.
Wow. Okay, so not so harmless.
Not really. It underlines the point that sarcasm, especially when it's used to dismiss how you feel, it's inherently aggressive. It's like a little verbal jab, but with built-in deniability.
I didn't mean it.
Right. And think about it. Using sarcasm like that persistently, it can be a low-risk way for someone to kind of poke at your self-esteem, see if you'll call them out.
So it's a probe. Seeing what they can get away with under the cover of a joke.
Exactly. Will you value your own feelings enough to say something? Gently but firmly.
Okay, so how do you say something? What's the best way to respond when someone pulls the just kidding card after saying something that didn't feel okay? You don't want to seem like you can't take a joke, but...
Right. You don't want to escalate, but you need to mark the boundary. The best thing, stop the laughter, yours, theirs, just pause. And address it directly, but without accusation. You could say something like, hey, I like joking around too, but I actually didn't find that funny.
Simple, calm.
Yep. And then just be quiet for a second. Let that hang in the air.
Ooh, the power of the pause.
It's huge because their reaction then tells you everything. Do they backpedal, maybe apologize, adjust their behavior, or do they double down, get defensive, insist it was funny and you're the problem? That reaction confirms it. It wasn't just a clumsy joke, it was a probe and they didn't like being called on it. That's the data you need.
Right. That response really clarifies their intent. Okay, so we've had the sexual test, the sarcasm test. What's the third one?
The third one might be the most revealing overall, I think, because it's about how someone acts when there's nothing obviously in it for them at that moment.
Okay.
We call it the consideration test. And on the surface, it sounds simple. It's just about how someone treats you when they don't actively need something from you.
So less about direct interaction, more about background behavior.
Exactly. It's about the pattern. It's not just about, say, asking how you are when you're sick. It's broader. Do they check in if they know you're having a tough week? Or do they only pop up when it's convenient for them or when they want something, attention, plans, whatever?
Gotcha. It's about genuine care versus transactional interaction.
Precisely. A truly considerate partner or potential partner, they don't just show up for the fun times, the easy stuff, or, when the lights are off.
Right.
They're the person who thinks to bring soup if you mention you're sick.
Yeah.
They remember you had a big presentation and ask how it went. They recall some little thing you mentioned weeks ago. It shows they're actually listening, actually paying attention.
It's that emotional attentiveness.
Yes. And that's not just nice to have. Multiple relationship studies show that this kind of emotional attentiveness, these consistent small acts of care, they are incredibly strong predictors of long-term compatibility.
So if you're constantly wondering, do they actually see me? Do they care about my life outside of how it relates to them?
That feeling, that question mark, that's often your answer right there. If you have to constantly wonder, the consideration probably isn't there. And without that kind of mutual investment, that back and forth care, you end up building on like an emotional deficit. Leads to burnout, resentment, not connection.
It really drives home the point that kindness, consideration, it's not a bonus feature. It should be the baseline.
Absolutely the baseline.
I actually had an experience like this. I dated someone once who, on the surface, passed the first 2 tests we talked about, no problem. Charming, respectful of physical boundaries, funny.
Okay.
But when it came down to real emotional presence, consideration, it was just absent, totally absent.
How did that show up?
It felt like every single interaction was on his terms, his schedule, his comfort zone, what he needed or wanted in that moment. And if I tried to bring up anything remotely difficult or something that required effort from him or was just inconvenient, poof, he'd just vanish, emotionally check out, or literally become unavailable.
That is such a classic example. It's what you might call the I'm available when it's easy relationship.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And it raises that question, why do those relationships always fizzle out or become deeply unsatisfying.
Why?
Because real intimacy, real connection that lasts, it demands consistent effort. It needs genuine follow-through. It requires caring about the unsexy stuff.
The unsexy stuff, like remembering dentist appointments or...
Well, maybe not that specific, but yeah, being there when it's not convenient, when one of you isn't feeling great, when things are tough. It's those daily small acts of showing up and considering the other person that build actual trust and deepen the bond, not just the highlights.
That makes so much sense. So, okay, we've covered these 3 tests. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you want people listening navigating dating, or maybe even looking at their current relationship to take away?
I think there are 3 core lessons here.
Right.
First, you teach people how to treat you. Your responses or lack thereof set the tone.
Right, you're setting precedents.
Exactly. Second, boundaries don't scare away the right person. They filter out the wrong one. A good partner respects boundaries.
That's a really important reframe.
It is. And third, your standards are not too high. They might just be new or unfamiliar to someone who's used to getting away with putting in less effort, less respect.
Yeah. Don't lower your standards to match someone else's low effort.
Never.
And listen, I just want to add, if you're hearing this and thinking, oh man, I've totally failed these tests in the past, or you recognize yourself in relationships that felt draining, like the one I described, please know that's so common.
So common.
It's not a sign you're weak or doing something wrong. Honestly, just recognizing these patterns now, that's a huge sign of growth,
Yeah,
self-awareness.
absolutely. It's about learning and moving forward, which leads to maybe a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
How might understanding these tests, the sexual test, the sarcasm test, the consideration test, how might knowing about them empower you? How could it help you approach future dates, future interactions with more confidence, more clarity? So you can really align with partners who respect your boundaries, who meet your standards right from the very beginning.
That's a powerful question to leave people with. How to use this knowledge proactively.
Exactly. Food for thought as you move forward.